Hi everyone, so I'm Daniel, this is Benedetta, and we are Artefact, and we're going to talk to you today about a project called Pillars of the Community. It's designed for a community pavilion at the heart of a new development in Cambridge that we designed in collaboration with Sarah Hersey and David Knight from Cake Industries. So while the ideas in completed projects somehow feel fixed, we thought today we'd talk about something that isn't built and never will be, partly to keep the ideas alive and because it reflects lots of themes that are kind of reappearing in our work that's kind of ongoing and on the drawing board, particularly around materials which have a history before they arrive on site, and our ambition to build simply and allow the materials that we use to tell us how to build, and our ambition to design buildings that are rooted in place and reflect the culture of the people and the communities that we're building for. While starting to think about this talk last week, I stumbled across the extracts of a talk from Colin Ward that he gave to Sheffield University in the 1970s. And it's this incredibly prescient alternative or vision of an alternative architecture that he predicts will emerge from the crisis of energy and resources in the 70s. Now, 50 years on, we're obviously in a crisis of energy and resources, and this talk seems to predict a lot of the trends that our kind of emerging generation of architects seem to be working with. So Ward, in his talk, predicts, among other things, the growing importance of retrofit. He talks about moving away from highly processed materials, about buildings that have reduced energy demands in use, and structures that are adaptable over time and evolve with the needs of their users. He talks of an architecture which enables and encourages residents and users to take ownership of spaces, and of a renewed connection between architects and craftspeople. And all these ideas somehow feel like they reflect things that are happening today, and yet this was 50 years ago. And this discovery of Ward and this talk has somehow reinforced in our thinking the idea that in some ways the future is in the past. And in our work we look backwards through time to try and help sculpt the spaces and places of tomorrow. So this project we're talking about today is a new expression of some old ideas. And while we might design new buildings and new structures, the materials in them aren't new. And before they arrive on site, they have stories to tell, and stories which continue long after our buildings are gone. Stories of deep time. So when we use a lump of sandstone, for example, it's been formed in the ground over tens and sometimes hundreds of millions of years. So a building's never really new. The materials in it are borrowed, and they go on to have a future life at the end of the building's existence. And our materials have stories to tell of geology, of land, of industrial processes, and of economy and the people that make them. They embed ideas around culture and ritual and ways of life, and they embody memories. So it used to be that the character of our towns, our villages and our hamlets were built as a reflection of the biospheres with locally available materials and by local craftspeople. But this link has been lost. It feels like materials now travel from far and wide, and too often the backstory of the materials are forgotten. And the result is that the architecture that we have is increasingly homogeneous and placeless. So this, Ellis, is a project that we're not talking about, but I will briefly mention, so I've slipped another one in there. This is called Bedrock, which was it was developed for an ideas competition, and it's a vision for a community that's rooted in its place. It's a vision for the revitalisation of a redundant quarry on an island made of stone, where a new community is constructed from the materials underfoot. And there are ideas here about collective construction, about harnessing the indigenous knowledge of local stonemasons as part of a training programme. And we developed a model for a more collective way of living, born out of changing patterns of daily life. Materials here are not just something to make walls out of. They speak of local culture and of economy and employment. Unconsciously, it feels like this is an alternative architecture in the spirit of Ward. So the theme of time in our work relates not only to materials, but also to our thinking and research around community spaces and social infrastructure in the city. And this is an extract from a study that we're working on around the community spaces delivered as part of post-war social housing. It used to be that we built these kind of community spaces to last, but increasingly through years of underinvestment and austerity and the erosion of the social contract, these vital social spaces are increasingly unloved. And today, the design of these spaces for communities are increasingly temporary. So this is our Common Rooms project, where we made a little go a long way through the passion and the energy of the community. And they really worked hard to bring this thing to life. And it's well loved and it's well used. But as with so much of our social infrastructure today, it feels temporary. It's a meanwhile project, and the materials feel provisional and impermanent. And yet it takes time for community bonds to form. So in the project we're talking about today, and in our work more generally, we're not striving for novelty. In some sense, the ideas are already there. And this sense that we're working with with existing ideas is really well reflected in a passage by Italo Calvino, the writer, in If on a Winter's Night, a Traveller, where he writes, "At times, I think of the subject matter of the book to be written as of something that already exists, thoughts already thought, dialogue already spoken, stories already happened, places and settings seen. The book should simply be the equivalent of the unwritten world translated into writing." And in a way, in our work, what we're looking to do is translate the unbuilt world into building. The ideas for our projects are already out there. They already exist in the ether. They're stored in drawings, in conversations, in memories, in buildings, in artifacts and materials across time. And the ideas arrive in our work in unexpected ways, and they take on their own forms and meaning through interpretation and the spirit of the people and the places we work with. So that concludes the abstract part of the talk about non-linear time, but I'm aware the clock is ticking, so I'll hand over to Benny to talk about how we tried to translate some of these ideas in a concrete way into this project.
Thanks, Dan. So I'm going to talk to you about the actual project. So Pillars of the Community was an invited competition to design a public pavilion for a new development site in Cambridge called Devonshire Gardens. It was a collaboration with Sarah Hersey, artist and spatial designer, doing a lot of work with communities across the country, and David Knight from Cake Industry, which are fabricators and engineers. The site, which is highlighted in yellow here, was part of a strip of new mixed-use developments along the railway track to the southeast of Cambridge. The scheme involved the demolition of large sheds to build 5 to 4-storey housing blocks arranged around a small square with the community pavilion at its heart. It was a development facing away from the surrounding neighbourhoods that felt quite generic in its design. Initially, it was quite difficult to develop a design in response to the immediate surrounding. However, the site was adjacent to the Mill Road, which is a neighbourhood known for its independent shops and its diverse community, a very active community that strenuously campaigned against both Tesco and Sainsbury's opening branches on the Mill Road, a community that actively celebrates its rich culture. So on one side, we had a tabula rasa condition, so common in many developments, and on the other, we had a neighbourhood with a very rich history, a diverse community, and a strong sense of civic engagement. So we came up with a very simple proposition, a pavilion supported of an eclectic mix of stone columns, celebrating the diverse and independent nature of the Mill Road community. Early on in the design process, we decided to use stone, an old-age material, in contrast with the surrounding new buildings. By introducing a natural material which has taken millions and millions of years to form, our aim was to create a sense of permanence, a heavy structure that could have been built a long time ago and would last for years to come. The design of the columns and the material choice was developed in close collaboration with Sarah, based on her experience of working with communities across the country. It was a very deliberate decision in response to the temporary nature of community projects and the gradual erosion of social infrastructure. Using large masses of stone was our attempt to give the project weight and allow the community to feel grounded. We were also keen to build upon the material history of Cambridge and the connection of buildings to the geology of land, as illustrated in the research by the Department of Earth Sciences at Cambridge University into the wide variety of stone used in buildings across Cambridge. The structure is made from an elementary palette of 3 materials: masses of stone, lengths of timber, and panels made out of hemp. To ensure the structure felt rooted both in its community and in its place, we set ourselves the challenge of sourcing all materials within 50 miles of the site. The ambition was not only to deliver a carbon-negative pavilion, but to develop a structure that reflects the surrounding biosphere, contributes to the local economy, and strengthens regional supply chains. Our proposal combines stone from the Lincolnshire limestone belt with timber from Thetford Forest, corrugated hemp panels, grown and fabricated on the nearby Margent farm. Working with quarries in both Portland and Northumberland on previous projects, we discovered that quarries across the country have large waste streams due to the strict selection process of facing stone. So you get masses of stone which are dumped due to imperfections, cracks, and colour variations that are inherent in a natural material. We saw accessing these waste streams as a great opportunity to use a durable, low-carbon material that is also reasonably affordable for a community project. So as Dan mentioned, we're interested in the idea of building simply. The pavilion is made of a primary timber structure which rests on 5 stone columns, supporting a secondary timber structure above. The roof is made of straight lengths of wood that can be easily constructed, dismantled, and reused at the end of the building's life cycle. In plan, the pavilion has a simple rectangular form with the 5 large columns randomly arranged around the primary structure. A kiosk activates one corner of the pavilion with serveries facing in 2 directions. A bespoke floor treatment extends beyond the pavilion, terminating in an amphitheatre on the left and a bench carved into a plant on the right. 2 holes in the roof cast light into the pavilion, animating the space as the sun moves across the sky. The standing stones rise high above the timber structure, breaking through the roofline. They appear as found objects on site, a roof merely hovering over them, a roof that might in time be removed to leave the stone pillars to stand as ruins within the landscape. Some of the stones sit firmly on the ground, others sit lightly, giving a sense of weightlessness to the whole structure. Randomly arranged, we imagined they would become focal points for all types of people to gather around. So, by rooting our project in place, working with available local materials, and thinking about patterns of life in the surrounding neighbourhood, we ended up with something a little bit unexpected.
So we wanted to talk about this project today, as I mentioned, partly just to keep some of the ideas alive for future projects and by almost talk them into existence in the ether. And they're coming back into kind of current projects under development in different ways. So we've got one project we just finished where there's a large boulder that supports a very delicate balcony expressed above ground, and another large structural blocks of stone are expressed internally and they support a timber roof, almost as if it's kind of pillars of the community with a thermal envelope. And in a pair of houses we're currently designing on some farmland in Somerset that we've reinterpreted and reimagined a kind of typical farmhouse typology with echoes of found agricultural buildings in the wider area and foundations again made from stone from a local quarry. So gazing back to look forwards, we're continually trying to find new expression in old ideas. Thank you.